1 billion people for whom no access to electricity means that they cannot enjoy the benefits of technology for their well-being regarding their health, cannot use any equipment that uses electricity for taking care of their health. 1 billion people that cannot educate themselves using the technology that we have here available to us in Washington at our headquarters, as we do here. 1 billion people that are deprived from the good things that we have because of access to electricity.
The Secretary General was very clear that the way to think about the SDGs in terms of the fact that we now have to implement them, right? We've been through 3 years of negotiation of what they should be, but now we have to implement them, is that we are the first generation that actually has a chance to end poverty, and the last generation that has the opportunity to stop climate change. So if you needed any motivation, then just, mull on that, right? So that's his marching order. And when I saw him the week before the summit, when he introduced me to the General Assembly and sort of gave me my mandate from 1st of January, and very clearly in the General Assembly, we can't get into a sort of a fight about the goals, but there are some goals which are enabling of others. And so it isn't really that we have to secure access to sustainable energy for all by 2030. We actually have to do it a lot earlier than that. Because if we don't do that, then we're just simply not going to be able to make the achievements in health or education that we want to. I mean, unless you can safely give birth in a hospital facility that is able to run an operating room safely, then we're not going to get to where we want to go. And I think it is not insignificant that the agreement of the SDGs was unanimous. I think it was not insignificant that that the first possible display of seriousness of intent after the adoption of the SDGs is the Paris Climate Accord. And I think it's not insignificant that the countries in the room talking about how to fix this problem are not the usual suspects. It does embrace the Gulf, it does embrace the middle-income countries. Russia, China, and India are in the room. This is not a conversation of Nordic bilateral donors together with the UK and parts of the US government that don't have any money. Right? This is a very, very serious conversation being led by the countries who are going to be at the heart of the transition. And the private sector that's in the room is old energy and new energy, big and small, together with big finance and new high risk-taking, highly leveraged finance. If all of those people are in the room trying to fix this problem, then there is a very important role for the World Bank Group to play on the lessons that have worked in the past, the things that we know about what to do in order to set smart investment climates that will allow all sectors of the economy to grow, and are very clear about where the World Bank Group will need to take more risk, use its broad shoulders, risk errors, risk mistakes, because that's from where we learn, in order to get access to energy for everybody, first mile and last mile, not for 2030, but for much earlier than that, because by 2030, we want healthcare and education. We want women to be equal, and that won't happen without energy. Thank you.
We need to do something very differently. What gives us that confidence as a bank group, which is that bank group actually has really achieved a lot of successes, which is what gives us the confidence that we can talk about this challenge today. Briefly, in 3 regions, we have good winners. In sub-Saharan Africa itself, in 2 of the countries, Rwanda and Kenya, where the access growth had stalled, the bank group stepped in and helped jumpstart very remarkably. You can see the numbers there. And if that kind of a pace could be achieved in all of the sub-Saharan African countries, I think the bank group can meet the challenge. And in South Asia, it was interesting that Bangladesh, where the grid electrification had almost come to a halt, off-grid electrification jumped in and then pretty much compensated and even did it better than the grid electrification for some time. And this was because the bank group was able to be there, the IFC and the bank together, helping the Bangladesh government. In East Asia, it's been a remarkable success in 3 or 4 countries, Indonesia, Laos, and Vietnam. They have almost come close to universal access in just 20 years. Remarkable, actually. And importantly, we need to see here that while the bank group was involved in all of these countries are different. They have different income groups. They have different sector structure. And they all adopted different national vision. So what can we glean from these lessons as the core of the lessons going forward? Sustained commitment of the government. Government should be in the driver's seat. I think the strategy clearly recognizes that. And so how do we make that happen? And sector-wide, least cost plans rolled out with a long-term vision. Combining grid and off-grid. I think Rachel clearly pointed out a challenge that, how can off-grid actually be used now to do things faster? How can we connect people faster? And importantly, because of the challenge of finance, and private sector needs to provide more financing going forward, how do we ensure the financial sustainability of the sector institutions? Bank has really gone in and tremendous efforts on the part of the bank, but of course, with only a 50% success, but that's the nature of it. That simply shows that what a difficult challenge it is, but hopefully coming out of the New York Declaration last week, the countries themselves will now show a different commitment. And of course, targeting the poor to ensure that they also get connected to the network is a very important point. Bank has done tremendous amount of work in identifying where they are, what are the good models. And in Laos, I think it was a great success. And in Africa also, it has identified. I think going forward, bank group needs to keep in mind very clearly that it is the poor that needs to get access, because by 2030, that is the challenge for us all.
And one big barrier for us working in low access countries and making a difference is political will and commitment. Frankly, in many low access countries, the leadership is not committed to energy equity and to eliminate energy poverty, for the very same reasons that any political analysis would tell you, that poor people without access are not politically powerful. They don't count that much. So are we surprised that providing basic access is not very high on many leaders' agendas? And I think part of the challenge for us in the World Bank is also to bring that debate right inside our own walls. I mean, again, the IEG report says that we should be active in just about every low-access country. It takes two to tango, folks. I mean, we have to have an agreement between our client, our country leadership, and in this case, the global practice. I don't think the global practice is hesitant to engage. But I can name many countries where basic access is simply not a priority because there isn't that meeting of the minds between the leadership and the leadership in the bank who's deciding on country priorities. You have to take a systems approach, okay? So you can't effectively serve the unserved or serve the poor unless you fundamentally have a healthy energy sector and a healthy utility sector. By healthy, I mean one that's well-planned, well-governed, that achieves cost recovery and financial sustainability.
But in summary form, the kinds of things we're doing is, one, providing support to sponsors at an early stage when they're looking at these off-grid solutions. And there's a whole range of support that we provide in terms of business intelligence, in terms of evaluating proof of concept, helping them with market intelligence, the full range of things, and it's really demand-driven. Early in the process, we were also helping them with quality assurance, and the impact we've had has been tremendous in that kind of work. We're also continuing that work, but also moving to other areas where ultimately, what would be great is if we could get large global sponsors to come in and support this area, because they have the expertise, they have the balance sheets, and they have the increasingly the desire to work in this area. What they're not sure is whether there are viable business models for them to come into the off-grid space. So increasingly what we're trying to do through Russ's group is provide support to companies like Total, EDF, E.ON in getting into this off-grid space. And we've had some early success in a number of markets.
The main concern is whether we'll be able to attract enough private sector engagement. There's a lot of things happening in the world nowadays. I mean, the economic downturn, the tremendous political instability in some regions, the commodity pricing, I mean, it has negative effect on credit risks, and in some countries particularly. The private sector in some looking very skeptical in some regions and on opportunities that they can pursue. So we should be able to sort of mentally to turn around from working with the majors to probably working with companies that are in the sort of second or third tier, and looking for opportunities to get engaged with institutional investors and support their projects in some of the countries. But also, I think that we struggle in some countries with finding projects that would meet our criteria and finding well-structured deals that are not tainted by reputational issues or by environmental and social problems. And I think how we can improve in these areas, it's very challenging.